As long as there are those who fight to make it as easy as possible for dangerous people to get their hands on guns, then we've got to work as hard as possible for the sake of our children. We've got to be ones who are willing to do more work to make it harder.
We are back. That was the president last night at a dinner here in Washington for the Congressional Black Caucus. Joining me now, the Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre. Mr. LaPierre, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, David.
Is this the new normal? Another mass shooting, a former New York City police commissioner described it that way. The president talked about almost a routine that the country goes through after these horrific acts. Is that what we're forced to live with at this point?
Well, let's talk about this week. David, this is a tragedy that should not have happened, a memorial service that should not be taking place, and victims that should not be victims. In a post-9/11 world, a naval base within miles from Congress, the White House, 7 miles from here, largely left unprotected, a terrorist target, a high-value terrorist target, completely unprotected. That can't stand. NRA is calling today for layers of security around our military bases. And the other thing we need to take a look at is all these brave men and women that are trained in firearms, that signed up to serve in the military, they're largely disarmed on our military bases. We need to look at letting the men and women that know firearms and are trained in them do what they do best, which is protect and survive.
This is similar. After Newtown, you were outspoken in saying that more security was the answer. This is what you said after that massacre.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
This was the Navy Yard. There were armed guards there, Mr. LaPierre. Does that not undermine your argument?
No, the whole country, David, knows the problem is there weren't enough good guys with guns. When the good guys with guns got there, it stopped. I mean, what really happened here, the mental health situation in the country is in complete breakdown.
And I do want to get to that, but let's just focus on the security aspect, because can it be the sliding scale where you do have armed guards there, but now there's not enough armed guards? And when it comes to schools, if only we had an armed guard and then we had teachers who had weapons, then we could stop it. I mean, where does it stop?
How could anybody look at what happened this week and say there was enough security there? I mean, there was one guy, a private security firm, God bless him, he ran toward the fire. There were 6 others there that were guarding the gates. The Capitol Hill SWAT team was told to stand down. Where's the outrage about that? The radios didn't work. We need to turn 7 minutes response. We need to turn 30 minutes before they bring down the shooter into 7 seconds and 30 seconds. That's what we need to be doing, and that's what I'm talking about with armed response. There's not a homeowner in Northern Virginia that if somebody's breaking in their door would be satisfied with 30 minutes.
You just heard the president basically saying we got to keep the fight up for gun restrictions. Is the gun control debate over?
David, you know, all the outrage this week, the first 2 days of the elite media and the politicians trying to stir this toward firearms, the outrage ought to be placed on an unprotected naval base, on a criminal justice system that in Chicago that doesn't even enforce the federal gun laws when we could dramatically cut violence, on a mental health system that is completely broken, on a check system that is a complete joke in terms of stopping the bad guys, and a criminal justice system in this country. Just this past week, because of budget collapse, they're releasing 23,000 people back to the streets in Los Angeles, a lot of them violent and a lot of them sex offenders. That's where the outrage of the American public is.
Can I ask you about mental health? Because it seems so very difficult, and as someone who represents a group keenly interested in protecting core rights, there are also the rights of individuals when it comes to involuntarily committing them to a mental institution because of mental illness. Look at the timeline for the shooter here, Alexis, where he's just under the radar. In May of 2004, he's arrested for shooting tires out in Seattle. September 2010, he's arrested after he fired a bullet through his ceiling in Fort Worth. August 2013, called police in Newport, Rhode Island, told them that he was hearing voices in his head. Apparently, they were so concerned about him at work that they call his mother, but they don't actually call the Navy. Should someone who's showing any signs of mental illness like that be able to purchase a gun?
They need to be committed is what they need to be. And if they're committed, they're not at the Naval Yard. Look, I've been into this whole check business for 20-some years. I've said the system's broken for 20 years and nobody listens. It's broken in terms of our military bases of checks. On the gun check, the NRA supported the gun check because we thought the mental records would be in the system, we thought criminals would be in the system, and we thought people would be prosecuted. We're in a situation now where the criminal records aren't in the system, the mental records, even those adjudicated dangerous, are not in the system, and nobody's prosecuted.
I mean, I take your point.
But here's what happens. So the Aurora shooter in Colorado gets checked and is cleared. The Tucson shooter gets checked and gets cleared. Aaron Alexis goes through the federal and state check and gets cleared because the mental health system makes this person completely unrecognizable.
But I'm asking what the NRA would support. In other words, you're saying you would, like in Florida, for instance, if you were voluntarily committed to a mental health institution, that you would support barring gun purchases. Do I have that right?
I think if they adjudicate you like Virginia's done now, where if you're involuntary committed, or if the mental health people say you're dangerous, you need to be in the system. Can there be a lower threshold,
though, that you could support, where there's some evidence of mental illness that would say, let's do whatever we can to reduce the carnage and try to stop sales?
Yeah, let's do whatever we can. Let's fix this broken system right now, which nobody wants to fix. I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to have this discussion today. It's on other channels. When the camera goes off, nobody's going to do anything. And if we leave these homicidal maniacs on the street, they don't obey the law, they could care less about it, they're going to kill. Yet the only way you can stop them is they send up the red flags. It's practically like a plane going down the beach with a sign behind it saying, I'm dangerous, and we leave them on the streets.
I want to show you a piece of tape in just a second. Let me set it up here. We asked people on Facebook, what would you like to ask Wayne LaPierre? You know, there are so many people who oppose you and the NRA because they say, look, the vast majority of Americans support gun rights legislation. You successfully recalled 2 state legislators in Colorado who supported additional restrictions. Here was a victim at Virginia Tech who was on with my colleague Andrea Mitchell this week, and he asked you this question. I want to give you an opportunity to respond. I'm going to play that.
I'd ask Wayne, look, let's talk about what it means to be a responsible gun owner. You know, do you think as a responsible human being that if you sell a gun to somebody you don't know, that you should require a background check to make sure they can legally own it?
Private sales between hunters, hunter to a hunter in another state, a farmer to a farmer shotgun. No, I don't believe you ought to be under the thumb of the federal government. But that's what's wrong with this town, David. Here we have a military base completely unprotected. We have a mental system that's completely broken down. They're trafficking in 13-year-old girls out down the street. There's all kinds of drugs, all kinds of guns, and the priority of this town is, hey, do you think a hunter that sells a gun to a hunter in Kansas ought to have to be under the thumb of the federal government? No, I'll tell you what the NRA is for. Interdict, incarcerate violent criminals, get them off the street. Interdict people that are having mental problems, get them into treatment. Enforce the federal gun laws. If there's a drug dealer with a gun in Chicago, 100% of the time, federal law, Eric Holder, prosecute him. Fix the mental health system, and let's get our fiscal house in order so that we can stop releasing the bad guys back to the street.
This debate will continue. We always appreciate your views and answering questions here. Mr. LaPierre, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, David.